There was an empty seat in the courtroom that Tuesday morning, and everyone noticed it. The small chair beside Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, the chair where 9-year-old Tommy should have been sitting. The boy whose life had been saved. The boy whose parents were now suing his rescuer. Carl Peterson noticed that empty seat most of all. His 70-year-old eyes kept drifting toward it, sadness etched deep in the lines of his weathered face. For 12 years, he'd driven Tommy's school bus. For 12 years, he'd greeted that boy every morning with a smile and a "Good morning, Tommy boy." For 12 years, he'd watched him grow from a tiny kindergartner with a Batman backpack into a bright, curious fourth grader who always saved Mr. Carl the front seat. And 3 weeks ago, on an ordinary Thursday morning, Carl had saved Tommy's life. Now Tommy's parents sat rigid in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, their expensive lawyer already laying out charges that made Carl's weathered hands tremble against the defendant's table. Assault, reckless endangerment, bodily harm to a minor, criminal negligence. They were demanding damages. They were demanding Carl's pension, every dollar he'd earned in 42 years of public service. They were demanding he never be allowed near children again. Carl's hands, the same hands that had pulled 7 people from a burning apartment building in 1989, the same hands that had cradled his late wife Dorothy through her final days, the same hands that had gripped that school bus steering wheel through rain, snow, and sunshine for 12 faithful years, the same hands that had saved Tommy Davidson's life. Those hands now trembled with exhaustion and heartbreak. Judge Frank Caprio entered the courtroom, his black robe flowing behind him, and everyone rose. At 78 years old, Judge Caprio had seen thousands of cases. He'd witnessed humanity at its best and worst. But as his eyes swept across the courtroom that morning, from the empty child's seat to the old man with a firefighter's medal pinned to his worn flannel shirt, his instincts told him something was very, very wrong here. Courtroom setup. The accusation. "Please be seated," Judge Caprio said, settling into his chair. He opened the case file, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Case number 2024 CVJ 8847. Davidson versus Peterson, a civil suit alleging assault and bodily harm to a minor. He looked up at Carl Peterson, really looked at him. The old man sat alone at the defendant's table. No lawyer, no family, no support, just an elderly man in a carefully pressed shirt and that medal. Judge Caprio could read the inscription from across the room. Providence Fire Department, 30 years of dedicated service, Carl J. Peterson. "Mr. Peterson," the judge said gently, "do you have legal representation?" Carl stood slowly, his knees clearly aching. "No, Your Honor. I can't afford a lawyer. I'm representing myself." His voice was quiet but steady, the voice of a man who'd testified at town halls and school board meetings, the voice of a man who'd comforted frightened children and worried parents, the voice of a man who'd never imagined he'd be standing in a courtroom as a defendant. Judge Caprio's expression softened. "I see. And you understand the charges against you?" "Yes, sir." Carl's voice cracked slightly. "I understand that saving a child's life has somehow become a crime." Across the aisle, Mr. Richard Davidson shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. He was a tall man in an expensive suit, everything about him screaming money and entitlement. "Your Honor, this man, this reckless old man, assaulted our son. He bruised Tommy's ribs. He caused him pain and trauma. He had no right to put his hands on our child." Judge Caprio raised a hand. "Mr. Davidson, please sit down. You'll have your opportunity to present your case." He turned to the plaintiff's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in a gray suit. "Counselor, please proceed." Attorney Jennifer Mills stood, clicking open her briefcase with practiced efficiency. "Thank you, Your Honor. On the morning of November 14th, my client's 9-year-old son, Tommy Davidson, was a passenger on school bus Route 47, driven by the defendant, Mr. Carl Peterson. At approximately 8:17 a.m., Mr. Peterson physically grabbed Tommy, performed an aggressive physical maneuver on him, and caused bruising to his ribcage and abdomen. She held up enlarged photographs. These are photos of Tommy's injuries, taken at Providence General Hospital that same day. As you can see, there is clear bruising, evidence of excessive force used by the defendant. Carl closed his eyes. He remembered every second of that morning, Tommy's face turning blue, the terrible silence when the boy couldn't cough, couldn't cry, couldn't breathe, the other children screaming, the panic, and then his training kicking in. 30 years of firefighter emergency response flooding back through his 70-year-old body. Mr. Peterson never called for permission, Attorney Mills continued. He never asked if Tommy was truly choking. He simply attacked a 9-year-old child with enough force to leave marks that lasted for days. My clients are seeking full damages for medical expenses, emotional trauma, and punitive damages to ensure this defendant never works with children again. Judge Caprio studied the photographs, his brow furrowed. Yes, there was bruising, but something about this entire presentation felt wrong, staged, rehearsed. Mr. Peterson, the judge said, setting down the photos, I need to hear your side. What happened on November 14th? Carl's testimony, the morning everything changed. Carl stood again, slower this time. He took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 42 years of service to his community. Your Honor, I've been driving school bus Route 47 for 12 years. Before that, I served with the Providence Fire Department for 30 years. I have 6 grandchildren of my own. Every child on my bus, all 23 of them, they're like my grandchildren too. He paused, his throat tight with emotion. Tommy Davidson. Tommy's been riding my bus since kindergarten. He's a sweet boy, gentle, kind, always says please and thank you, always asks me how I'm doing. When my wife Dorothy passed away 2 years ago, Tommy drew me a picture, an angel. He said it was Mrs. Dorothy watching over me. Judge Caprio noticed Mrs. Davidson shift uncomfortably in her seat. That Thursday morning started like every other day, Carl continued. I picked up the children at their stops. Tommy got on at Maple Street, just like always. He sat in the front seat. That's his favorite spot. We talked about his math test. He was nervous about fractions. Carl's voice grew stronger now, the memory sharp and clear. We were 3 blocks from Riverside Elementary when I heard it. That sound, that terrible sound, every parent and grandparent dreads. A child choking. I looked in my mirror, and Tommy was standing, his hands at his throat, his face turning red, then purple, then blue. The courtroom was completely silent. I pulled over immediately, put on the hazards. The other children were screaming. I ran back to Tommy. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. His eyes. Carl's voice broke. His eyes were so scared, Your Honor. He was looking at me like, please, Mr. Carl, help me. I performed the Heimlich maneuver. It's what I was trained to do. 5 compressions. On the 5th one, Tommy coughed. Something came up. I'll get to that in a moment. And he gasped and started breathing again. I held him. I told him he was safe. I told him everything would be okay. Judge Caprio leaned forward. What came up, Mr. Peterson? What was Tommy choking on? Carl reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small plastic evidence bag. Inside was a white pill, still partially intact. This, Your Honor. The insult. When dignity is destroyed. Mrs. Davidson gasped. Mr. Davidson's face went from red to white in an instant. That's not, Mrs. Davidson started, but her husband grabbed her arm, silencing her. Attorney Mills stepped forward quickly. Your Honor, we object to this theatric. That pill could be anything. There's no chain of custody, no. But Judge Caprio was already reaching for the evidence bag, his eyes sharp. I'll decide what's relevant, Counselor. Mr. Peterson, what is this pill? Before Carl could answer, Richard Davidson exploded from his seat. This is ridiculous, he shouted, his voice echoing through the courtroom. Your Honor, we're not going to sit here and listen to some senile old man make up stories. He's a washed-up firefighter who can't accept that he's too old, too slow, and too dangerous to be around children. Mr. Davidson, Judge Caprio warned. But Richard Davidson was beyond control now, his carefully constructed image crumbling. This old fool should have retired years ago. Instead, he's driving around our children, putting his arthritic hands on our son, and now he's trying to... That's enough! Judge Caprio's voice cracked like thunder. Mr. Davidson, you will sit down and you will show respect in my courtroom, or I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand me? Richard Davidson fell silent, but the hatred in his eyes as he glared at Carl was palpable. Carl stood there, tears streaming down his weathered face. Not from fear, from heartbreak. He had dedicated his entire life to service, to protecting people, to saving lives, and now he was being called senile, dangerous, a fool. Judge Caprio saw it all. The old man's shoulders sagging, the dignity stripped away by cruelty, and something fierce awakened in the judge's heart. Mr. Peterson, Judge Caprio said softly, his voice now gentle as a grandfather's. Please, sit down, take a moment, and then I want you to tell me about this pill. The twist begins. Tommy's secret. Carl wiped his eyes and sat. His hands were shaking now, but not from fear, from grief, from the weight of what he had to say next. Your Honor, I'm a mandatory reporter. I was as a firefighter, and I am as a school bus driver. When I saw what Tommy had coughed up, I knew immediately what it was. It's a prescription anxiety medication, a strong one that no 9-year-old child should ever have in his possession. Mrs. Davidson made a small sound, almost a whimper. I kept it, Carl continued. I gave it to the paramedics when they arrived. They transported Tommy to the hospital. I filed a report with the school district and with Child Protective Services that same day. He looked directly at Mr. and Mrs. Davidson now, his voice filled with sorrow. I didn't want to believe it. I prayed I was wrong. But Tommy had been different these past few months. Quieter, sadder. Sometimes he'd fall asleep on the bus. Sometimes he'd flinch when I made sudden movements. Lies, Richard Davidson roared. Your Honor, this is a disgusting attempt to— Sit down, Judge Caprio commanded. I will not tell you again. He turned back to Carl. Mr. Peterson, are you suggesting that Tommy was being medicated without proper supervision? I'm suggesting more than that, Your Honor. Carl's voice was barely a whisper now. I'm suggesting that Tommy was being drugged to keep him quiet, to keep him compliant, to keep him from telling anyone what was happening at home. The courtroom erupted. Attorney Mills was on her feet. Mrs. Davidson was crying, real tears this time, and Richard Davidson looked like a trapped animal. Judge Caprio banged his gavel. Order! Order in this courtroom! When silence finally fell, the judge fixed Carl with an intense stare. Mr. Peterson, these are very serious allegations. Do you have any evidence beyond this pill? Carl nodded slowly. Your Honor, I have something better than evidence. I have Tommy's own words. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. After the incident, after I saved his life, Tommy was in the hospital. His parents were in the hallway, arguing with the doctors. A nurse, Linda Chen, she's worked at Providence General for 20 years. She sat with Tommy, and Tommy drew this picture. Carl unfolded the paper and held it up. It was a child's drawing, but the image was heartbreaking. A small boy hiding under a bed, 2 tall figures standing over him, and words written in a child's careful handwriting. I don't want to sleep. The medicine makes me sleep. Please don't make me sleep. Nurse Linda Chen, Judge Caprio's face had gone pale. Bailiff, I want that picture entered as evidence immediately. And Mr. Peterson, you said a nurse witnessed this? Yes, Your Honor, Linda Chen. She's waiting outside. I asked her to come today. Bring her in, Judge Caprio ordered. The courtroom doors opened, and a woman in her 50s entered, still wearing her hospital scrubs. Nurse Linda Chen had kind eyes and steady hands, the kind of nurse who'd seen everything and believed in doing what was right, no matter the cost. She was sworn in quickly. Nurse Chen, Judge Caprio said gently, please tell the court what you witnessed on November 14th. Linda's voice was clear and professional. I was assigned to Tommy Davidson's room after he was admitted for observation following the choking incident. His parents were in the hallway, very agitated. Tommy was lying in bed, awake but groggy. I sat with him, hospital policy when a child is alone. She glanced at the Davidsons, pity in her eyes. Tommy asked me if Mr. Carl was okay. He was worried about Mr. Carl. He said, I didn't mean to get Mr. Carl in trouble. I just wanted the medicine to stop. Mrs. Davidson was sobbing openly now. I asked Tommy what he meant, Linda continued. He said his parents had been giving him pills to make him sleep. Every night. Sometimes during the day, too. He said they told him it was vitamin C, but it made him sleepy and fuzzy. He said he didn't like it, but they told him good boys take their vitamins. That morning on the bus, Tommy said he was scared the pill was making him feel weird. He tried to spit it out, but it got stuck in his throat. That's when he started choking. Judge Caprio's hands gripped his desk. Did Tommy say why his parents were giving him these pills? Linda Chen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He said they wanted him to be quiet. He said his daddy got angry when he made noise or asked questions. He said the medicine made him good. The defendant's collapse. Richard Davidson was on his feet, his face a mask of rage and panic. This is a conspiracy. That old man put her up to this. He probably paid her to. Mr. Davidson, Judge Caprio's voice was ice. I suggest you sit down and consult with your attorney immediately. But Richard Davidson was beyond reason. We were trying to help our son. Tommy has behavioral issues. He needed to be calm. We were following doctor's orders. Which doctor? Judge Caprio demanded. I want a name. It was. Richard Davidson was stammering now, his carefully constructed lie falling apart. Attorney Jennifer Mills touched his arm, whispering urgently, but he shook her off. Your Honor, you don't understand. Tommy is difficult. He's defiant. He needs discipline. We were just trying to make him behave. And this old man, he pointed a shaking finger at Carl. This interfering old fool had no right to get involved in our family business. Mrs. Davidson grabbed her husband's arm. Richard, stop. Please stop. But he couldn't stop. The truth was pouring out now, unstoppable. That medication was working. Tommy was finally manageable, finally obedient, and then this bus driver had to play hero and ruin everything. We needed that medication. We needed Tommy to be quiet. The courtroom was frozen in horror. Judge Caprio stood slowly, his face a mixture of fury and heartbreak. Mr. Davidson, you are admitting in open court that you were drugging your 9-year-old son to make him compliant? Richard Davidson seemed to realize, finally, what he'd done. The color drained from his face. He sat down heavily, his head in his hands. His wife was weeping. We didn't mean. We just wanted. We're not bad parents. We just wanted a quiet house. Judge Caprio's moral judgment. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 40 years on the bench and 78 years of witnessing humanity's capacity for both cruelty and grace. In all my years as a judge, I have seen many things. I have seen good people make mistakes. I have seen bad people pretend to be good. But what I have witnessed here today, he paused, looking at the Davidsons with something close to pity. What I have witnessed here is a level of selfishness and cruelty that shakes me to my core. He turned to Carl. Mr. Peterson, please stand. Carl stood, his legs unsteady. You are 70 years old. You have served this community for 42 years. You pulled people from burning buildings. You drove our children safely to school every single day. And on November 14th, you did what you have done your entire life. You saved someone. The judge's voice grew stronger. You saved young Tommy Davidson's life, not just from choking. You saved him from parents who saw him as an inconvenience rather than a blessing. You saved him from a childhood of being drugged into silence. You saved him from growing up believing that who he is, a normal, energetic, curious 9-year-old boy, was somehow wrong. Carl's tears were flowing freely now. And for this act of heroism, Judge Caprio continued, his voice rising with indignation, you were insulted. You were called senile. You were called a fool. You were sued. You were threatened with losing your pension, money you earned through decades of risking your life for others. He turned to the Davidsons, and his voice became steel. Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, your lawsuit is dismissed. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate investigation by Child Protective Services. I am ordering a full medical evaluation of Tommy by independent physicians. And I am ordering both of you to undergo parenting classes and psychological evaluation before you are allowed unsupervised contact with your son. Mrs. Davidson collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Mr. Davidson sat in stunned silence. But that's not all, Judge Caprio said. Mr. Peterson, you filed a report with CPS on November 14th. You did everything right. You saved a life, and you protected a child. And for that, I am directing the court to award you compensatory damages for emotional distress, legal costs, and reputational harm. He looked at Attorney Mills. Counselor, your clients will pay Mr. Peterson's pension equivalent salary for the next year, plus an additional $50,000 in damages. If they refuse, they will be held in contempt and face criminal charges for their admitted drugging of their son. The gavel came down with a thunderous crack. This court is adjourned. Mr. Peterson, please remain. I'd like to speak with you privately. Bailiff, please ensure that Child Protective Services is contacted immediately regarding Tommy Davidson's welfare and current location. The child's reaction, Tommy's voice. As the Davidsons were escorted out by court officers, a small commotion erupted at the back of the courtroom. The doors opened, and a social worker entered, her hand holding that of a small boy. Tommy Davidson. The boy's eyes swept across the courtroom, past his mother being led away in tears, past his father in handcuffs, and landed on Carl Peterson. "Mr. Carl!" Tommy's voice was pure joy. He broke free from the social worker and ran across the courtroom, throwing his small arms around the elderly man's waist. Carl dropped to his knees, embracing the boy he'd saved, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Tommy boy. Oh, Tommy boy, are you okay?" Tommy pulled back, his young face serious. "I told them, Mr. Carl. I told them everything. About the pills, about being scared, about how you saved me." His lower lip trembled. "Did I get you in trouble? Daddy said I got you in trouble." "No, son." Carl's voice was thick with emotion. "You didn't get me in trouble. You told the truth, and that's the bravest thing anyone can do." Judge Caprio was openly wiping his eyes now. He came down from his bench, something he rarely did, and knelt beside Carl and Tommy. "Tommy," the judge said gently, "do you know who I am?" "You're the judge," Tommy said, his voice small. "That's right. And do you know what judges do?" Tommy shook his head. "We make sure the right thing happens. We make sure good people are protected and bad things are stopped. And today, I want you to know something very important." Judge Caprio placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Mr. Carl is a hero. He saved your life. And nobody, not your parents, not anyone, had the right to tell him he did something wrong." Tommy looked up at Carl with eyes full of love and trust. "I know he's a hero. He's always been my hero. Even before he saved me from choking." "Why is that?" the judge asked. "Because every day Mr. Carl makes me feel safe. He smiles at me. He asks me about school. He remembers things I tell him. He makes me feel like I matter." Carl Peterson, 70 years old, a lifetime of service behind him, broke down completely. He pulled Tommy close and wept, for the boy, for all the children who feel invisible, for every moment of kindness that makes a difference. Judge Caprio stood, addressing the social worker. "Where will Tommy be staying?" "We've contacted his maternal grandmother," the social worker replied. "She lives in Connecticut. She's driving down now and has already passed our background checks. She didn't know about any of this. She's heartbroken and angry and determined to give Tommy a good home." "Good," the judge said firmly. "Very good. And I want weekly reports on Tommy's welfare for the next 6 months. This court will remain involved until I'm satisfied that this child is thriving." He looked down at Tommy one more time. "You're going to be okay, son. I promise you that." Extended epilogue. 6 months later. The early summer sun poured through the windows of Riverside Elementary School's cafeteria. The end-of-year celebration was in full swing. Children laughing, teachers smiling, parents chatting over punch and cookies. At a table near the window sat an elderly man in a neat button-down shirt, a medal pinned proudly to his chest. Carl Peterson was surrounded by children, not just Tommy, but a dozen others from School Bus Route 47. They'd made him a banner that read, "Mr. Carl, our hero," with each child's handprint in different colors. Tommy Davidson sat beside him, healthy and bright-eyed and normal again, a 9-year-old boy who laughed too loud and asked too many questions and was finally allowed to be himself. His grandmother, Margaret, stood nearby, watching with tears of joy. She'd quit her job in Connecticut to move to Providence permanently. She'd filed for full custody. And every night, she thanked God for Carl Peterson, the bus driver who'd saved her grandson's life in more ways than one. Principal Anderson approached the table, smiling. "Mr. Carl, I have something for you." She handed him an envelope. Inside was a letter on official school district letterhead. "Dear Mr. Peterson, on behalf of the Providence School District, we would like to officially commend you for your extraordinary heroism and dedication to the safety and welfare of our students. Your quick thinking and brave actions on November 14th, 2024, saved a child's life. Furthermore, we would like to extend an invitation for you to continue driving Route 47 for as long as you wish. The children have requested it, the parents support it, and we believe our community is better with you in it. You are the kind of hero who doesn't seek recognition, but deserves it anyway. With deepest gratitude, Providence School District Board of Education." Carl read the letter twice, his hands shaking. Then he looked at Tommy, really looked at him. The boy was coloring a picture, his tongue stuck out in concentration, completely absorbed in his art. Normal, happy, free. "Mr. Carl?" Tommy looked up. Will you come to my baseball game next week? Grandma Margaret said I could join Little League now. I'm going to be a pitcher. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Tommy boy, Carl said, his voice thick with emotion. That night, Carl drove Route 47 one more time, even though school was over for the summer. He just wanted to remember the route, every stop, every turn, every familiar house where he'd picked up children for 12 years. When he reached the spot on Maple Street where Tommy had boarded that last fateful morning, Carl pulled over. He sat in the driver's seat, his weathered hands on the wheel, and thought about all the lives he'd touched, all the children he'd kept safe. All the mornings of, "Good morning, Mr. Carl," and "Thank you, Mr. Carl," and "We love you, Mr. Carl." A firefighter protects people from flames. But sometimes, Carl realized, the most dangerous fires are the ones that burn in broken homes, hidden from sight. And sometimes the greatest act of heroism is simply refusing to look away. His phone buzzed. A text from Tommy, sent from his grandmother's phone. "Mr. Carl, I drew you another picture. It's you and me and Grandma Margaret and Judge Caprio. We're all smiling, because we're a family now. See you at my baseball game. Love, Tommy." Carl Peterson, 70 years old, sat in his school bus and cried tears of pure joy. He had spent 42 years saving lives. But today, he finally understood. Sometimes when you save someone else, they save you right back. 3 blocks away in his chambers, Judge Frank Caprio sat at his desk, holding the framed child's drawing Tommy had made 6 months ago. The drawing of a hero. The drawing that had changed everything. On his desk was a note he'd written to himself, one he looked at every single day. Justice isn't just about laws, it's about seeing what others miss. It's about giving voice to the voiceless. It's about protecting the vulnerable. And it's about honoring the heroes who walk among us, even when the world tries to tear them down. Below that, in Tommy's careful handwriting, were words the boy had added when he'd visited the judge's chambers last week. "Thank you for listening, Judge Caprio. Thank you for believing, Mr. Carl, and thank you for saving me too." The judge looked out his window at the city he'd served for 40 years. Somewhere out there, Carl Peterson was driving his bus. Somewhere out there, Tommy Davidson was playing baseball with his grandmother. Somewhere out there, 23 children were getting ready for summer vacation, safe and loved and protected. And somewhere out there, in courtrooms and bus routes and hospital rooms and small acts of courage, heroes were still doing the right thing. Even when it cost them everything, especially then.